Well, first of all, thank you so much, Castro, for hosting. You are a champion, for everything that all of us stand for. You've been an incredible leader, not only in Texas, but nationwide. We all, them, but also me, we all follow what you're doing, and we are here to learn, and to be able to empower everybody, especially this young people's voices. So thanks so much for having us.
So they have very powerful voices.
Yeah, they do. They do.
They're doing me a favor by being here today.
Oh,
They called me today.
I think
Thanks
it's
all for speaking
mutual.
up.
But all this to say thank you, and thank you, because the five of you have traveled from home, got out of your very busy schedule. All of you guys have really powerful voices that we all follow every day. I feel like I see you every day, although no, it's me and millions of people. And so thanks for being here, and thanks to the staff of Congressman Castro and the staff of the LDC. We're so honored to be here. And with that, we'll start this conversation. And I'd love for, I think the congressman doesn't need an introduction. We know he's an icon, but I would love each one of the five of you to introduce yourselves and tell us, who you are, and why you're here. You want to start, Brendan?
Sure, yeah. So my name is Brendan Perez. I've been doing social media for about 3-4 years. I have a background in sociology, where my passion for the political sphere kind of began. And I'm here today just because, especially in relation to my social media, just for brief background, I'm Mexican and also Taiwanese. And I'm also queer. So I feel like my identities are always on the political playground, so to speak. And I've come to terms with the fact that everything that I do on social media and the voices and faces that I represent, it's, especially with the recent administration changes, right now with the following that I have grown, it's a really important time to bring awareness to everything and just bring light to people like you, for yourself, that that are kind of fighting for everything that I stand for, that I am. And yeah, just kind of doing that.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
Hi, first I just want to say thank you for having us. It's an honor to meet you. I follow you on social media, so I know that you've been dealing with cancer. I'm actually the proud partner of a cancer survivor who just beat cancer last year. My name is Vanessa Diosdado. I'm from rural Northeast Texas, and I'm the proud daughter.
Which town are you?
It's called Silver Springs, Texas. It's about an hour and a half from Dallas on a good day without traffic. I'm the proud daughter of Mexican immigrants and proud granddaughter of Mexican immigrants as well. I come from a mixed status family, so I know what it's like to have a loved one consistently live in fear because of their immigration status. So immigration is an issue that's something I've been very passionate about for as long as I've been able to fully understand how it affects my family. And other than that, I'm also a young mom, and there's so many issues that I'm really passionate about, but I would say immigration is the first because I feel like it's consistently being threatened, our livelihoods as a family of mixed status.
So,
Chris.
Congressman, my name is Chris Cabezas. I live in LA. I'm from Southern California. Originally grew up on the border, San Diego and Tijuana. I'm a content creator, also a television journalist, but I'm doing the transition to social media, which is like where the power has turned to now with regards to media and getting the word out and helping the community. It's just become more powerful than traditional media. So I'm in that transition, and I'm also a son of immigrants. It's a topic that I am passionate about as well, and I admire you. Thank you for having us.
thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for having us. My name is Che. I have been in the immigration system now for 30 years, dealing with it on everything from all, status, no status, and everything in between. And I use my social media to explain to people that even if you do it the right way and you work hard, this system is filled with a lot of booby traps and ways that it can still mess you up. And we see now even more that they're, taking away people for pathways to status. So I like to educate both through, the news and humor, because that's the way a lot of people don't realize that this is crazy that we're living these times, living under these conditions. and I try to alleviate some of the pain as best I can through stand-up. And yeah, it's a little bit about the work that I do online, trying to educate the community.
Very good. Yeah. Hey, my name is Carlos Espina. I make content on primarily TikTok, but also Instagram and Facebook in Spanish. News, but I give like my own opinion on things, inform the community about everything that's going on. And yeah, I mean, I'm just here for the same reasons everyone else said. I think we're in very troubling times, and a lot of people in the community feel like no one's fighting for them. And realistically, it's a valid sentiment. And so I think you're one of the few Democrat or Republican who's actually, standing up for our community. So I think it's important to meet and to talk and see where we're headed and how things can hopefully get better one day.
No, thank you all. Well, before we get started on our conversation, I just want to say to each of y'all, congratulations on everything that you've worked for, everything that you've earned, literally from the ground up for all of you. And to have such powerful voices. And so young, I'm 50, so I'm going to say young for everybody. It's just incredible. And I'm honored that y'all could spend time with me and talk about these very important issues, particularly immigration, because in many ways, the community is under siege with what's going on now, with people being really disappeared because the government is not accounting for where they're taking them. The undocumented, of course, being harassed, but also permanent residents and even citizens being harassed as well. So there's a lot to talk about.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. It's the times, every time that a crisis like this happens, we think it's the worst we've seen, but this time around, it's definitely the worst that we've seen because there is a whole infrastructure, right, that is putting in danger, the situation of all of our community. And, it's important to talk about, the emotionality of it, but it's also important to talk about the economics of it, right? We know that there are millions of jobs not being filled because there's no workforce, and it's like shooting ourselves in the foot, right? We already don't have enough people in the workforce, and now we're going to actually, fire some millions more. So I think that's important to talk about, and I'd love to hear your point of views. But I also would love to talk, and you and I talked about it before, about the narrative, right? Why is these numbers that we do, the numbers that you actually highlight, Chris, your expertise is highlighting all these incredible Latinos that are doing marvelous things in this country. The narrative that you constantly talk about, Carlos, of immigration, and of course your own experiences, right? And so I'd love to start with that. I don't know if you want to mention, well, first of all, the economic part, but also the narrative part, and what jumps, what comes to mind when I'm saying these things about the narrative and about the workforce that we're actually not having, because we're not here to take. We're not takers. We know this, right? The numbers all don't lie. We are not only not takers, we're humongous contributors. So without us, if we're the engine of the growth of this country, what's going to happen?
I can start.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think what the anti-immigrant crowd has been really effective in doing is essentially othering the immigrant community and making it seem like we live in two separate worlds, citizens here and then the illegals over here, when the reality is just not like that. And I think many people in this country just don't realize how much everyone's lives overlaps on a day-to-day basis. I actually had a reflection on this a couple of days back. So I grew up in College Station, Texas, which is a pretty conservative city. And I went to this restaurant that's like pretty popular there. And yeah, it was like Friday night, it's all full. It's mostly, people, some of them have their Trump supporter hats. And so you can kind of tell what the environment is like. And so I go to the bathroom, but to go to the bathroom, you have to go through the kitchen. And so the kitchen staff recognized me and they all started talking to me. And they're all, they're all from Guatemala, and they're all telling me how, yeah, we don't have papers or anything. And so it's funny because like, it's sad, but it's funny at the same time, because you wonder, like, do the people at the front of the restaurant, who probably most of them overwhelmingly voted for Donald Trump and probably support mass deportations, do they know that right now, like, how interconnected their lives are in that very moment and in many other moments? And what would they think if ICE just showed up at that restaurant right then and there and started rounding people up? You start going through these hypotheticals, and people don't really support it as much as they think they do. They support it when they see it far away from them. But then, at the end of the day, undocumented people are working for citizens, many of them who are business owners who voted for Donald Trump or these Republicans. And, they have their own construction businesses in Texas or whatever it may be. And so they're okay with it happening over there. But hey, don't do it to my workers, don't do it to my people, or don't do it to the good ones. And I
don't
mean,
hurt my business.
Yeah.
Let me continue doing what I'm doing.
And so what I think is going to happen, it's going to get to a point where like it's going to start affecting so many people, because that it's not just going to be about, the undocumented immigrants, because when they suffer, the rest of the country suffers. And it might take a while to know, but once it starts coming to your community and your businesses and your people, I think there's going to be a shift. And I think we need to be prepared for when that happens, because I do think the average person with common sense is going to look around and say, hey, okay, maybe we took this a little bit too far. And so I think we just have to be prepared for that moment, which I have no doubt is coming, and pretty soon I fear.
You're absolutely right. We're the engine. We're the engine. So without the engine, I don't know how things are going to work out.
No, and that's what I think about. I think just for years driving along Texas highways, and you think about in Texas and other parts of the country when it's 100 degrees outside, 102 degrees outside, and you look at the roadways or you look at who's working on the roofs of houses, and a lot of that is immigrant labor, documented and undocumented. And there's 4 or 5 major industries that would not exist the way they do, but for that immigrant labor, they would start to crater. And so, yeah, I mean, and I think we're seeing that now. We started getting calls and emails and outreach from business owners when the new administration came in a panic, really, because they started to realize what the workforce meant to them, and how harmful it would be if you actually had this dragnet of mass deportation.
Absolutely. We're here to talk to representatives, and it's a group of business owners, organizations like the Dairy, Foundation of
Sure.
Nebraska, and the meat packing, industry leaders of, all those states that are. So these people voted, which is interesting, right? And they're here to say, we voted for you, but now you're not helping us because we're bankrupted. Some of them, are bankrupted. So so you guys, what have you experienced this? Have you seen these two worlds that, Carlos was mentioning? It seems like there are two worlds, but the truth is it's one, because they're completely related.
Yeah, I would say, if I can speak really quickly, this is something that the way that you worded it reminded me of something else about the othering of certain demographics. And so this is something that I've seen of various types of immigrants or even just ethnic backgrounds. And so even going back, I think the overall shared topic is the dehumanization of a group of people to make it seem less drastic than what it actually is. And so right now I've noticed that the terms undocumented, immigrants, illegal, alien, all of these terms, yes, they have actual definitions, but I see them being thrown around almost like slurs, almost like in a derogatory manner. I mean, for me, regardless of my citizenship status, regardless of the fact that I was born here, I have those words thrown at me as if they're supposed to hurt. And especially being in a place like Chicago, I'm in the mariachi scene. All of our clients speak Spanish and use cash only. And we're usually in the Mexican neighborhoods, and we're seeing in our area of work, we're seeing less people booking us because they don't want to have parties, because parties attract the police. ICE has been kind of patrolling the historic Mexican neighborhoods in Chicago. And even going back to the topic of othering, I've had conversations with people where they're not, a lot of it goes back to me saying, hey, you're voting against human rights. And they're like, no, they're not human rights, they're immigrants. And I'm like, why are those terms being separated? And also with all the work being done, even if we do, let's say, move forward in a progressive manner from a sociological lens, that's going to drastic long-term effects of the people that exist right now that are sharing these mindsets of, okay, they're like, what is it? Everything DEI right now, that's also being thrown as a slur. Every job protection is kind of under attack right now. And even if we get these things fixed, those mindsets will still exist. And so that's going to have long-term effects in the years to come. That's just kind of the topics that have crossed my mind throughout this conversation.
Super important, especially because you're mentioning a lot, the slurs, the stereotypes. Mexican has become an insult, which, me having been born and raised Mexico, for me, it's such a joy and I'm so proud of it. But here in the United States, it's only in the United States, by the way, becoming, so Chris, you live, kind of in the border, you were born in both worlds. And how do you see this stereotyping, talking about narrative, right? Talking about why are those words now an insult?
I don't know why they're an insult, but I do think that everyone's becoming very vocal about their thoughts openly now. And maybe we just didn't see that before, that there was those thoughts going around. But I mean, honestly, in San Diego, where I grew up, I'm not sure if you guys know, but even though it's on the border, it's pretty conservative. And there's even there was, I don't know if there still is, but when I was in high school, there was like a KKK group registered in the city of Santee, which is San Diego County. And it's on the border, we're on the border. But yeah, there's just racism everywhere, and it doesn't matter where. And I guess people just now feel more comfortable, being loud about it.
And I think that the narrative helps the racism, right? When you put it in words and words mean something so drastically, that is like the tool that racists use. And that's why I think the narrative is so important. And I wonder, Che, because, you're not Mexican, but you have been undocumented. I'm sure you've been called Mexican many times.
Yeah, people thought DR was a part of Mexico at one time. I'm like, I'm Dominican. Like, what part of Mexico? I'm like, none of it.
Well, that's the thing. All the different groups, Latino groups, everything gets jumbled into Mexican. Right? Everybody's Mexican.
Yeah. And you brought up some of my experience growing up. These times are so scary that I don't know about you guys, but I find that I've had to hide parts of myself again to stay safe. And that is such a heartbreaking thing, because I was finding such beauty in my life and in the art that I was making, being honest with my community about the things I've been through so they could relate. But with the narrative changing so drastically that I've actually become fearful for my own life going on stage and sharing it. That's why I can't stand white dudes that are like, oh, they cancel you out here. I'm like, no, bro, I can get canceled. Like, I can, somebody in the audience to just have a bad day and call the authorities on me. What kind of world that we live in, where I'm trying to exercise my First Amendment freedom of speech, talking about my life through comedy, and somebody in the audience could actually call someone on me. So yeah, the rhetoric is very powerful. We live in a world where these anti-immigrant people have a chokehold in the conversation. I was looking up some of your work, and I saw that you were trying to pass a pathway to citizenship for immigrants who work during the pandemic, essential workers. And I'm like, how do you work with people who don't even believe the pandemic happened?
No, you're right. No, we weren't able to pass the bill.
Yeah, well, I've heard.
Yeah, it's challenging. I mean, I think there's a few things going on. I feel like, number one, there's a real effort. You talk about a narrative, and you're right, it's kind of whiplash because it changed in a matter of years, where there seemed to be momentum and real sympathy for change, a positive change and reform. And then now this effort to equate all immigrants or migrants as dangerous, right? Like, just assume that everybody's a danger, everybody's a potential serial killer that's coming to harm you. And then on the DEI stuff, to make it so that anybody that's African American, Latino, Latina, gay, a woman, that just by your identity, that you're just automatically unqualified, that you're per se unqualified, regardless of your credentials, your experience, your expertise. And those are pernicious things. And I also think that's going to take some years to get out of, to get past, well beyond the politics of this particular administration.
Can I ask you a question? How frustrated are you with the sort of attacks from the other side if you even try to stand up for immigrants' rights? Do you feel like it's tougher as someone who's always done this battle to try and continue from the inside?
Well, I mean, it's actually it's frustrating. The other side, some elements of the other side have always been frustrating, right?
Yeah.
Although, I mean, look, there were positive points. I mean, in 2014, the Senate passed a bill that wasn't perfect, but it was a comprehensive immigration reform bill. And then the Speaker of the House, the Republican Speaker, didn't put it on the floor for a vote, even though at the time it looked like we had the votes to pass it if we had voted on it. So there are points where we've come close to meaningful legislation. But then, I mean, it's the other side really shifting gears. I think right when you get to the Trump era in 2016, part of what happens is that they make immigration the number one boogeyman issue, and all of a sudden it becomes tougher for folks in the Republican Party, even those that are sympathetic and want to see reform, for them to actually stand up and say, yes, I support reform. And then our own folks also start to get nervous, right? Like I say I'm just going to speak for myself as a Democrat in Congress. Then they start to get nervous as well. And then now you kind of feel like you're on the defense, right? To be quite honest, because of the narrative that prevailing narrative right now, and what I mentioned with this effort to try to define immigrants as kind of like automatically dangerous to people. And I think we gotta talk about it. We gotta bring it up, because if we don't, it just remains kind of as an assumed thing. And I always think of my grandmother that came here as an orphan when she was 6 or 7 years old, and she came with her younger sister. My grandmother, she worked her whole, like most of her childhood, all of her adulthood, and never got in trouble with the law. She raised my mom, her only child. I mean, that's the story of so many different folks, so many different communities of people working hard, earnestly in this country, and oftentimes really not asking for very much from government, like keeping their heads down, doing their work. Um, you know,
Yeah, absolutely. And you and I have talked many times about the role of media in the narrative, right?
yeah,
I
absolutely.
mean, that's another thing that,
But that's how we met.
that's how we met. Exactly. I mean, in this report that we do every year, it shows that, first of all, we're invisible in English language media. And then second, the very few times, the 3% of the times when we have leads, half of them are negative. And especially for men, I have to say, you have, we did this in this last report, we did, especially men, there are barely any men representing something positive in the very few times that we are there. Pedro Pascal has some good roles in leadership, but other than that, right? He doesn't right.
He lived in Texas for a while.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think that, and you're saying we need to talk about this. We need to, we're buying, 30 to 40% of the box office. We're, doing 30% of all the subscriptions in platforms, and still we're not represented. Not only we're invisible, but when we're represented, it's always in a negative way, specifically for men, which is crazy. Lisa, what do you think of that? Have you been aware that we're talking about, we need to speak about this? Have you been aware that we're invisible in English media?
For sure, yes, I think so. I feel like anytime I come across, especially the issue over immigration, you always see Latino men who are immigrants painted in a bad way. They only highlight like the criminals that are men who are Latino, but they never highlight, like, unfortunately, when a U.S. citizen who may be, for example, a white American, and they do the exact same thing, they emphasize it more when it's the other way around. And it's definitely disheartening. It's something that at times it discourages me too, to keep, like advocating, because I just wish I could, yell at the top of my lungs, like, no, like these people don't represent us all. There's always bad apples in every group. It doesn't matter if they're just, immigrants. And given that my dad's a Latino immigrant man himself, I know firsthand that he's not, this person they paint him out to be. He's literally American in every way except on paper. He's been here since he actually just turned 50 himself. And on his 50th birthday, I got emotional just thinking about how he's been here since he was a child. I say that because he was under 18. And despite being married to an American citizen, despite having 4 children born in the U.S. and 2 grandchildren born in the U.S., no criminal record, even his parents and his siblings were able to get papers. He's never been able to get papers himself due to, well, the fact that our system is flawed and outdated. He has something called the permanent bar, which it's really inhumane. When you have it, there's really no way around it. So he just, lives in the shadows, unfortunately, while his children, he hopes they live, the spotlight never appears. So because of the platform I have, I've always told myself that I'm gonna, share our story in hopes of opening other people's eyes so they can see that people like my dad aren't, what the media tries to portray them as.
Exactly. And the power of media, right? I mean, it's thousands and thousands and thousands of images that we all watch, even if you never have a subscription to a platform, in the bus stop, on your way to the, to your office, billboards, the elevator, taxis. You are bombarded with all these stereotypes. And so we don't even know, and we internalize it. And sometimes, it's easier to just not think about it. And so we don't talk about it. But I think we have to, especially your generation, as assertive and as the voice that you have, you guys, we need to talk about it because the numbers are showing that your dad, who lives in the shadows, created the 5th largest economy in the world. So why would he have to live in the shadows, right? And if we don't talk about it, then, or sometimes we're ashamed, right? Or we're embarrassed, or we feel humiliated because we're so, non-important in media. But the truth is that when we have the chance, we drive pop culture, we drive growth, we drive music, we drive the shows. One of in the reports, and I should sum up it because I love this report, but it's important. Please take a look at it, because one of the things that we show in the report is that with that 3% that they give us, which is very little, we create the biggest hits. So we sell, right? You just look at the very demographic, music industry. We kill. And so, wow, why are we not portrayed? Why are we not sure? Why are stories, the story of your dad, of your families, of my family, not being told?
And I
So-
think that's even a precursor problem to the media part. I think that the stereotypes are so effective because people haven't really learned anything else about our community, right? Like, I was in, I don't know, a year and a half ago, I was presenting an award to a history teacher in San Antonio who also teaches Mexican American studies. And I asked him, how many historical figures do you teach in your class, right? Like Latina historical figures. And he said, well, like I always throw in extra people and stuff. I said, yeah, but if it wasn't you, right? Like if it was just the textbook. He said, oh, maybe like 3, right? Like 3 where they actually spend time on the person, not just a line or a mention, whatever. And so what has happened is that the Latino story has largely been left out of the telling of the American story. And so people don't know what contributions we've made to science or business or law or entertainment or whatever. So then when they see in the media, mass media, the same story over and over of you as like gangbangers or drug dealers or whoever. Like, I'm not saying there's nobody like that in our community. There are, right? And like in the neighborhoods where I grew up on the west side of San Antonio, but it's the predominance of that in media where that's almost, that's not exclusively, but predominantly what people see about you. That's the problem. Like it's there, it exists, but that's not the average, Mexican immigrant or Latina. I'm 2nd or 3rd generation, right? And I mean, and that's the pernicious part of it.
We did a white paper on criminality by race. Latinos have one of the lowest criminalities by race. Only Asians have a lower criminality. So why are we portrayed constantly as gang members? Yeah, there are gang members, but we have one of we are actually law-abiding, family-oriented, et cetera, et cetera. So that part is this word that you guys created, your generation created, that I love, describes what I feel every day: gaslighting. Because no, it's daytime, it's nighttime. No, the sun is out there. No, it's nighttime. And unfortunately, that not only is internalized by non-Latinos, but also by Latinos.
Oh yeah.
And so sometimes when we poll and we say, so what do we poll Latinos and we say, how do you think the Latino community is doing? And they go, well, I don't know, I'm doing really well, but I don't know about the others, because they actually believe the stereotypes, right? And when we show them the numbers, oh, really? Because I hate to tell you, you're not an exception. The majority of 84% of Latinos don't live in poverty. So they're like, oh, wow, I don't know, because they internalize this thing. So that's why the narrative is so, so important, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
It is vital. And your voice is so important. Yes.
Yeah, if I could add, just this conversation reminds me of all the way back in high school. So I graduated high school 2017. Yeah. But it was a conversation I had where I think around that time is when Trump first like started, running, got selected, elected, all these things between like my sophomore, senior year. I can't think of the timeline. But I started asking people because I was one of the only Mexican students in my predominantly white school. And there were so many things that I was hearing about what people thought of my family for the first time, thinking of what they thought of my community. And one of the first things that I asked was, how many Mexican friends do you have? Like all these people that said all these things about immigrants, undocumented people, whatever. I always said, how many undocumented people do you know? And how many Mexican friends do you have? And also, I would also ask, am I your darkest friend? Because I grew up with a lot of Black friends. And I was one of the lightest in all of my friend groups. And in most cases, I realized that I was their darkest friend. And so their only Mexican friend was the one that had an American passport, which was me. And I realized that they avoided, going back to the othering conversation, they avoided othering me because I was so similar to them. And then the same conversations happened as I went into college. I went to Indiana University, Bloomington, and a lot of the students were from the Northwest Indiana or even Chicago area, Chicago suburbs. And those same conversations were happening. And I found myself in a lot of situations where I was still a lot of people's first brown friend or just their darkest friend that they've ever had, which was really insane to me. And I think, I can go on that topic forever, but a lot of it goes back to even especially Chicago still being one of the most segregated cities in the US, and just having access to different people or just everyday community that you see as you're walking on your street, just who's working in your local restaurants and cafes and stuff like that. Just a lot of these people that have such loud and unfortunately powerful opinions that are negatively impacting our communities don't have any personal experience with a lot of us, which is something that I sit with every day. But
it's super, super important. And I hear you about Bloomington. My son lives in Bloomington. So, I can totally, it's crazy. It's another world. Yeah, there's no diversity.
Yeah.
Chris, you portray, that's what you do, and you do it amazing. You highlight all these Latinos that have incredible stories and that people don't know about. What is the response, and who responds to it? Is it basically Latinos that are saying, thank you for highlighting it? Or is it other people saying, oh, wow, I didn't know, and it's good to know?
No, I was living for the moment right now when you guys were saying that, the general market, the, media wasn't covering the positive impact of Latinos for the longest time, and it just so happened that during the pandemic, I started doing that, just highlighting the positive stories about Latinos on TikTok, and those were going viral, and people want to know those stories.
Yeah.
But I don't know, traditional media just they don't buy it, right? And so I also felt the need to share those stories because like my family's, like many of our families, super hardworking, always law abiding, I don't know, they're just the best, right? And it's terrible the way we're being portrayed. Like we're saying, like gang members all the time, like narcos, which is fine, but not why all the time, right? There's great stories out there. And so I love how now with social media, we have the power to show that side. I feel like it's a great responsibility we have. Like, let's just not show the crazy negative stories because that's already shown on,
Right. You want to hear all the stories, not only one story, which is the negative one.
I think, as a content creator, one of the things I really think about is you can't really control how other people portray you, but you can control how you portray ourselves and our community. And there's a big conversation, for example, happening right now in Mexico about, the narco culture, narco corridos and all this stuff. And I think, people are always going to portray us a certain way because of their prejudice, whatever. But I think we need to elevate, people who are music that has positive messages, movies that have series, that kind of stuff. Because actually a lot of young kids were like, oh, I want to be, they're like 14, 15, and their parents immigrated here for a better life. And they're like, oh, I'm worried because my kid, he wants to be a narco or all this stuff. And like, I think we also need to do a better job, and us that have influence of being positive role models for the younger generations. Because a lot of times they don't understand what's going on. They see, they'll see it on the news. Oh, Mexicans are this, and then they see their favorite artist talking about I ride with the Chapo and all this stuff. It's like, oh, this is the life I want to live. And I think we end up shooting ourselves in the foot. And so I think it's really important that we have positive figures and we uplift like content creators who are doing, encouraging younger generations to go to school, to get an education, or if they're going to work, to do it essentially not robbing people, not doing all this like these things that unfortunately many young Latinos are falling into. And it's sad to see because their parents came here for a better life, but because, a lot of situations going on and then their kids not having positive role models, they end up, kind of going astray and ending up in these difficult situations. And I think us Latinos who have influence need to also work in our community, because I see a lot of Latinos who their goal is, oh, I want to get an education and then I want to move to a nice neighborhood and then I want to just be as far away from my community as possible. And I think we have a duty, those of us who have the privilege of getting an education or going to school or, having whether it be followers or a substantial income, whatever it may be, then going back to our communities and using that to, help others who might be trying to get to the same place. Because I see a lot of that, like very successful Latinos, but they're very far removed from and you see it right now, even then, like people are asking where all these artists and these celebrities on TV, they're not talking about these issues because they live in, some suburban area outside of, I don't know, whatever big city, and they're completely disconnected from reality. They're not living, they're not seeing the impact of the ice rays and all this stuff because they're so far removed from it. So I think, yeah, it's like important to have Latino, representation, but if they don't represent our community, we've seen some of the worst representatives of our community, our own people. I mean, our Secretary of State right now, he's Latino. I don't think that's a huge victory for us. I'm not happy. Oh, we have a Latino Secretary of State. So I think, the representation argument only gets us so far, but it needs to be actual genuine representation. And I think that's where we're kind of falling short, and we have a duty to, do our part and be that positive representation, not just be Latinos to be Latinos.
But I think y'all are important and a very important part of filling in. I talked about this like black hole that we kind of exist in where our story has not been told. Y'all are very much an important part of getting that story told for folks, and a real version of it, like a very grassroots version of it. I'll tell you, I mentioned I voted against the TikTok ban. I mean, there were different reasons, but one of the reasons I voted against it is because of folks like you all, because you have been able to flourish.
Yeah.
And because without I wasn't going to wipe out a platform that would take away your voices for our community. And because otherwise, if you rely on all the big studios and all that and all the traditional media, they're not going to do it. And they haven't done it. And so, for me to just say like, oh yeah, let's just do away with it. No, it's too important a platform for people to feel like their experiences are reflected.
Absolutely. And you know what? Also in our report, you see how your voices are taking over all the decrease in studios and networks, right? I mean, they're losing battle. They're losing the battle because you guys are taking over. And this is exactly what happened with music 20 years ago, when the music became democratized and Pandora and Spotify and all these companies started emerging, where artists could actually post like you guys are posting. So you're making happen the democratizing of media, and we need you to keep doing it. So
yeah, and you heard me say it, Anna, but if they remain very exclusive and not inclusive, even though you have a Latino population that's 20% of the country and almost 30% of the box office and so forth, and like over indexes on streaming and all that. But if you did major companies that set the narrative and you remain exclusive, then I think you deserve to lose in the competition.
Absolutely.
I think you deserve to be supplanted by other platforms.
The value of the five biggest companies, except Netflix, has diminished almost to half of what it was 5 to 7 years ago. That's another analysis we haven't. So they deserve to be losing.
Yeah.
And they're actually doing mostly non-scripted shows, which are really cheap. So people, they don't want you to know, but you guys are transforming the industry. So think of YouTube, TikTok, all the social media, gaming, also Latinos driving that growth, right? So that's extremely important. And I just wanted to say, Carlos, with what you said about people being removed, I also think, and I'm talking about my generation, I also think that they are afraid. They feel like if they already got a role and if they stand up to their community, like to them, again, in favor of the community, they're going to lose that seat. Or people on boards, right? You and I know people that are in 3 boards and they don't speak up, right? I mean, but I do believe that your generation is very different. You're using your voice to bring attention with all the courage because you've seen other communities doing it and succeeding. But I want to say sometimes, yes, they're removed, they're selfish, but some other times they're just afraid. And it's so sad because that power is being wasted. It's being wasted. So we could talk about this forever, but I know they're already telling us that we have to leave. But I would love for everyone to share how you're using your voice, because you are, each one, I can tell the specialty of each one of you. And some of you, I think all of you are extremely loud, which I love how you get so upset, Carlos, and then Che is like, literally Che Guevara, it's like, and then you, Chris, with all these examples, like you're so excited about it, and you guys, and in your own, everyone in their own way. So how can we learn more from you? Because it's so, and of course, the Congressman Castro, who has been a champion for so long. So how can we use that voice? What advice can you all give us if you want to start?
Yeah, I mean, whether you have, especially with social media, whether you have 1 follower or like 10 million, I think people care about what we all have to say, but I also think they like the relatability of all of it. And even for me, I've noticed that I would see content creators getting, I don't think humans are made to have this much bad news coming every second of every day. With our phones right in our hands, we are getting second by second updates. That's so exhausting. I'm not built for that. So I'm very proud of everybody that is built for that. But even for me, one time I didn't expect to get this reaction, but I put something about something bad that just happened, some bad thing that was passed, I don't know. But then so many people started DMing me, just expressing like, I'm so tired. I want to move countries. I'm mad my family immigrated here. Like, this is not what we wanted. And so I literally just screenshot like 30 of these messages. And I posted it on my story. I think that day it got like 20 to 30,000 views on my story. And it was just of everybody being hopeless. And I just screenshot that and I just put on my story. I said, hey guys, like, I know it feels really lonely, but there's nothing that I can say that can make any of this better, but sharing this feeling and knowing that people care about this just as much as you do, like, they exist. They're just, everybody's hiding, everybody's quiet and so many people swiped up on that story. They responded to that story saying, thank you so much. Like, for some reason, seeing everybody else so helpless made so many people feel powerful again in knowing that there are other people that care. And even just aside from that, I like to take information that I think is important and necessary, and I'll share my opinion, but I also just like to put that information on the table so that people can do what they want with it. Because not everybody has access to all of this information. Not everybody has the resources to translate this from Spanish to English or vice versa, because the news is kind of different in both languages depending on where you're looking. But I like to just kind of present that and be some sort of outlet for those that might need it.
Thank you, Brendan. Thank you. Nessa?
So for anyone in the Latino community who, whether you feel angry or hopeless, a way to use your voice, I feel like, is just knowing the power you have. Latinos, our buying power is crazy. So you just be selective on what you buy, what you watch. Be selective with your remote as well. And if you're able to, of course, share information online, that's one of the best ways, I think. Y'all done a lot of the good work for sure, LDC, giving us a lot of this good information. And some of us have already shared it in the past. But I think we should always continue to, especially so that we can hopefully switch the narrative. And anybody can do it. I don't think you have to have a platform.
That's why we do it constantly, so that you have new material all the time.
And I think another way for sure is going to go vote.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yes, exactly. That's super important. It's another power of your voice, your votes.
That's supposed to be my line.
So
look.
They're two ahead of us. Chris.
I just think, as we saw with, President Trump's, winning and, presidency, many are saying it's because he actually went on these like podcasts and kind of catered to like the younger people in the crowd on social media. And I feel like something that, government officials and politicians should check out, they should start doing. Reach out to us, to do a story on you guys or to interview you guys or I feel like that's important. And I feel like that's also needed in the other side of the spectrum, because we've seen that with like some Republicans, but not with
Sure.
Democrats.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much it. I mean, I would like to also, we don't have time, but I would love to know more about like what stories, what social media is your favorite, what videos or needs do you like to watch? We can talk about that later.
I'll call you for an interview.
That's a great idea. Good point. Really good point.
Yeah, start a podcast. Che and Castro. People will love that.
Yeah.
Go over so well. No, one piece of advice that I want to give people is get out of the house. It's so easy to just be in the house and start feeling like the world is overwhelming you and nothing will ever be right. But when you I have I'm very fortunate I get to also like work with LDC, other organizations locally. I work with some organizations in my city, and going out and just seeing people working to help each other, or just sharing food or resources, or just going into those offices and seeing people just kind of excited about the work they're doing, trying to help others, revitalizes me, gives me hope that locally we are doing stuff for each other. It's very easy to forget that when you see like, oh, the federal government's not doing anything for me, but realizing like locally people are always doing stuff for each other. Gardens, the food drives, the daycares of taking care of each other's children. Whatever you can to help your neighbor, even knock on the door and be like, hey, do you just want to talk? People are usually home all the time bored. I think does a lot of good in bringing people into community, which is what we're missing. And I tell people, keep sharing your life on TikTok. Don't worry about going viral. I think seeing like a Latina grandma play with a puppy, I'm like, yeah, we'll do that. Look at us. We play with puppies like everybody else does. It reminds you just how much we are like everyone else, even though they try to other us. So just go out there and keep sharing your life. Your life is beautiful. Don't let other people make you feel like it's not.
Right. It's part of sharing our stories, right?
Yeah. That's where I get the.
Yeah, get out of it. Yes, you do. Carlos.
Well, yeah, just I guess the message right now is it's going to be a long 4 years. Well, 4 years will pass, and we have to take it day by day. I think it's very difficult. I get a lot of criticism for being too negative, but I think there really is no other sentiment in these times. It is what it is, and we have to recognize that in great part, this guy is president again because of our own community, and that is what it is, and we have to accept it and go back to, like Jess said, back to the community and see where did we go wrong. And then at the same time, also be honest, because a lot of people supported Donald Trump, not necessarily because they like him, but because they're very frustrated with the Democrats. And that's, having these conversations, what I try to tell people, just because the community is frustrated with Republicans now is not translating to support for Democrats, and it's for good reason. And I think the Democrats need to kind of wake up on a lot of issues, or otherwise, I don't see them getting any better anytime soon. And what that's going to turn into, whether it's going to turn into, independent Latinos running for stuff, or whether it turns into people, I don't know, you've seen it in Mexico, forming third parties, you saw it in El Salvador, I don't know, but I do think we are in a very critical time, and the Democrats, a lot of them are still kind of too soft on the issues, and people are noticing. And so, yeah, I'm kind of just trying to stay in my lane, let people know what's going on, and they can reach their own conclusions.
Yeah, Joaquin, maybe I don't know if this is politically correct or not, but when people call me and ask me what happened, why did Latinos vote? Some Latinos voted for Trump. I always say, I actually turn it around and I say, well, you're telling me we're the swing vote. Be very careful. From now on, you were the swing vote. You got to cater to us, to our needs, to what we want, to what we need, to our community. Stop ignoring us. Stop taking us for granted. So it's almost like that power that they're giving us when they blame us. I also say, well, I voted for them. Sorry, but I'm supposed not to be. But I know where I am and I'm happy where I am. But there are other people that are frustrated and that really didn't get from one party and voted for the other one. Be careful because they're going to continue growing and they're going to continue swinging the vote. So let the best woman or man win. It's almost like, you got to fight for us.
And I just want to say thank y'all. Y'all are doing an incredible job. Your voices are very powerful. Your presence here matters. Your engagement here matters. And I really do think that through your work, you're giving people a lot of hope in what for many people feel like hopeless times. So just keep doing good things.
Thank you so much.